Good morning, peace seekers. I'm Victoria Pearson, but you can call me V. I'm very aware I look like a bag of crap today, but I have been promising to do this video for a little while now. A few of you have asked me for it. So today I'm going to be talking to you all about how I finally managed to give up smoking for good, and now I don't even think about it anymore. That isn't the kind of conversation that I can have without a cuppa though, so I'll stick my kettle on, you stick your kettle on, grab your cigarettes if you need to, I ain't going to judge you about it, and then we will sit down and I will tell you all about how I gave up smoking for good. Now, before we get into the video and sit down with our cuppa and have a proper chat about it, I have to say something really important first. I am not a medical professional. I have literally no medical qualifications or experience whatsoever. So therefore, what I'm giving you in this video is not medical advice, okay? I'm just your mate telling you what worked for me. If you want to take something from it and see if it works for you, great. But if you are serious about giving up smoking and you want somebody to give you proper medical advice about it, speak to your doctor or your pharmacy or your local smoking cessation service. Don't take advice off of random chicks on the internet because we don't know anything about anything, okay? Now with that being said, I'll let you know how I did it. Come on. Okay, so as I mentioned in my introductory video, I think, was it my introductory video? I think it was my introductory video, that I used to smoke about 20 to 30 cigarettes every day. I was one of those disgusting people that would light a cigarette off of the dead end of the cigarette that they had just put out. I was the sort of person that if I didn't have any cigarettes, didn't have any money, I would make a roll up out of the butts of cigarettes that I had smoked earlier that week. It was vile. And looking back on it, I don't even know where I found the money to do that. Like, you would think that now that I've stopped smoking, I'd be rolling in it. Lots of stop smoking people tell you, put the money that you would have spent on cigarettes into a jar. And I didn't. And I really wish that I had now, because I would have gone on holiday or something by now and it would be awesome. Now, like a lot of people, I had attempted to quit smoking 10, 11 times before I found a method that worked for me. And I think that's quite normal. I've looked up a lot of facts and figures this morning for this video, and so I might be remembering slightly wrong, but I think it was 19 times is the average that people attempt quitting before they find a way to do it for good. And that was definitely true of me. I had had a lot of attempts. And I think that the main reason that those attempts failed each time was because I just wasn't ready for it. I didn't want to quit. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous because you're like, why would you not want to quit? You're spending loads of money, you're stinking yourself out, you're giving yourself wrinkles. Why wouldn't you want to quit? I wasn't ready to. I was scared, maybe. I didn't know what I would be like if I wasn't a smoker. And that sounds ridiculous now that I had internalized it as being part of my identity to that extent. But it was. This is a habit that I had been doing for my entire adult life, my entire teen years. I had been smoking. I started smoking when I was 12, yeah? And heavily as well, like just fully went all in there. And so I didn't know what it was like to be someone who didn't smoke. Another reason that my quitting attempts weren't working for me was because I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it because I felt like I should. I was doing it because I knew other people wanted me to. I was doing it to try and set a better example for my children. But I was never trying to quit because I just realised that I didn't want to smoke anymore. I was always doing it for somebody else for some other reason. And it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me. I had to get myself into the headspace where I realised that smoking was not something that I wanted to do anymore. Quite a few years actually, before I managed to quit, my grandparents, who were devastated that I was smoking because my granddad had emphysema himself from smoking, they bought me a book called Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. And it claims on the cover that you don't even need willpower to give up smoking, right? You can just read this book and you'll be sorted. And so I read the book out of pure duty. And obviously I didn't stop smoking. I wasn't in a headspace where I was receptive to the messages within that book at that time. But I do think that reading it has helped in some way, because I did start to internalize some of the messaging that's in it long before I actually felt ready to quit. And so some of those foundations were already there. But I think that a lot of smokers who read that book probably feel quite in conflict with it straight away, because it states, as do some other self-help things, that there's no such thing as addiction. And of course, if you are in the middle of an addiction, your initial response is, of course it does. I know it does. I'm experiencing it right now. I think the reason that these people say there's no such thing as addiction is because what they're trying to do is help you to understand that it's not an external thing that is forcing you to do a thing. That's not what addiction is. Addiction is you making a choice that you have made so often your brain doesn't even register it as a choice anymore. So things like, I get up in the morning, I brush my teeth. I'm not addicted to brushing my teeth, right? It's just something that I always do. When I wake up, I brush my teeth. And so it becomes a habit that I could easily stop, but it would feel really weird, wouldn't it, to get up and not brush your teeth? That would feel wrong. You'd feel weird for the rest of the day. You would be aware that you haven't brushed your teeth. You're not addicted to brushing your teeth. It's just that it's a choice that you've made so often, it doesn't feel like a choice anymore. And so if that choice was then removed from you, it would feel weird, right? Addiction, whatever substance that you're addicted to, is a choice that you keep making to use the substance, right? And often that choice is guided by things like physical symptoms that you feel from withdrawal. And that is perfectly valid, right? It's perfectly valid to say, actually, I do need willpower. This is hard. And I think that Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking and the Thrive program and things like that tell you there's no such thing as addiction, because they want you to know that it is something that is happening within your psychology, not an external thing that is affecting you. And you get to choose to make a different choice. But it's easier said than done. I know. Oh, that was hotter than I expected. So, they said there's no such thing as addiction, which then immediately made me go, well, yes, there is. And I found it quite difficult to internalise the other messages from the books then. I think maybe if they'd worded that a little bit differently, I might have been more receptive to it at the time. But one of the things that I did take from Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking was that it helped me see a hole in my logic. You see, as I mentioned earlier, I was somebody that as soon as I woke up in the morning, I would light a cigarette, because I had to have a cigarette or I wouldn't be able to wake up. And then last thing before bed, I would smoke a cigarette, because I had to have a cigarette to be able to go to sleep. There isn't a chemical in this universe that both wakes you up and makes you go to sleep. That is like saying that there is a pedal in your car that is both your brake and your accelerator. It doesn't make any sense. So once I realised that logically there is no such chemical that can both wake me up in the morning and send me peacefully to sleep at night, and so it must instead just be my brain doing that, that didn't help me straight away, I'll be honest. But that idea did kind of go into my subconscious a little bit, and my brain started churning it out. I take a little while to process things sometimes. And if you have had an idea in your head for a really, really long time, and then another idea comes along to challenge that, it can take you a little while to process it out. And you have very much, if you're a smoker, internalized the idea that addiction is a big, powerful thing in control of you. And so to consider the fact that actually it's something that you are very much in control of, that you are making decisions each day, first of all, it gives you a bit of responsibility for it, and that can be difficult to take. I didn't want to take responsibility for my addiction. I wanted to be like, well, I was too young to understand when I first started, and now I've started, I can't stop. That's easy to say, well, it's not my fault, I'm addicted. But at the end of the day, no one's going to come and unaddict you. Yeah, so realising that each time you use the substance, in this case smoking, you are making an active choice, even if it doesn't feel like you're making an active choice, actually did make a difference in how I started processing my quit smoking journey. Fast forward a few years, I read the most awful article all about child exploitation in the tobacco industry. Now, you probably follow me on Twitter, that may be why you're here, and so you will know that I'm a bit of a bleeding heart lefty, and when I started reading about how children as young as 3 years old are forced to work on these tenant farms for 60 hours a week, they don't get to go to school, they make £200 a year for doing that, and then handling all these wet tobacco leaves is giving them the equivalent nicotine to smoking 50 cigarettes a day, so they're getting all sorts of issues with their health just because of the chemicals, dealing with dangerous machinery, amputations happening, all that sort of stuff. And only a third of children that work for these tobacco producing industries ever finish primary school. So there is no way out of that for them. Once they become adults, they are forced to then work on tenant farms themselves for pittance wages, have their own children have to suffer in that same way that they did. It really tore at my heart in a way that nothing else did. After that, every time I smoked, I would just think, a child's life got ruined for me to do this. And yeah, I found that really, really difficult. And that's when I started to think about being dependent on cigarettes and how actually I didn't want to be dependent on billionaires running an industry that kills children in the global south. And that's what started to make me think, yeah, I really don't want to be a smoker forever. Still didn't quit then either. Still didn't manage to quit then. That was just another step on the journey. And I did talk to you before about how we do these things in tiny little increments. And so even though I'm saying, oh, these things didn't work for me at the time, I think they probably were a step on the way, a little increment on the way to changing my thinking about these things. Fast forward again, about 2-3 weeks before I gave up for good. And this is probably the most important thing. If you don't do anything else that I say, and I already told you in my little medical disclaimer at the beginning not to anyway, but if you don't do anything else, take away this, right? For the last 2 weeks before I gave up smoking, whenever I would have a cigarette, that is all I would do, right? You're not allowed to go on your phone, you're not allowed to read a book, don't read a newspaper, don't smoke while you're doing something else. Every time you smoke, from now until you quit, fully concentrate on that cigarette, right? Breathe it in, think about what it tastes like. How does it feel within your body? Does it feel nice? Does it feel good? Does it smell nice? Does it smell good? There will be times when you'll think, yeah, it does actually. And for me, usually that was a time, like if I was really, really upset and I was sobbing my heart out, and then you light a cigarette and you take a big of this cigarette and suddenly you feel better. It's actually nothing to do with the cigarette either, really. I mean, nicotine is a slight natural antidepressant, and so that's why some people do feel a bit low when they first quit smoking. But the main reason that you calm down when you light that cigarette, when you're in a right state like that, is because you take a great big deep breath. Now, if you've been following along with my videos, hopefully you've been taking a great big deep breath first thing in the morning anyway. That will start to help your brain feel happier. You need oxygen to be able to process all of the happy chemicals and things. And even though you are breathing in a hell of a lot of other crap and it is restricting the amount of oxygen, when you take a pull of that cigarette, you're taking a big breath in, including through your nose, which means that you are getting a deeper breath of oxygen than you normally would as well. And lots of the nerve steadying effects of cigarettes are actually from that great big lungful of oxygen. But I digress. For the next 2-3 weeks or however long it takes you to give up smoking, don't do anything else while you're smoking. Focus on that cigarette. Ask yourself, what does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? How does it feel within my body? And you've probably not done that for years, right? You've probably maybe never just sat there and just focused on smoking that cigarette, because you're normally on your phone at the same time, or you're chatting to your friends at the same time, you're all at break at work or whatever like that. And so you never actually really think about, you're doing it very mindlessly. You never really think about how it actually feels to smoke. And so if you do that, I'm pretty sure you're quickly going to realise that it isn't very nice. That's what happened to me anyway. And within maybe 3 or 4 cigarettes of me deciding that I was going to fully focus on each and every cigarette that I smoked, that I wasn't even going to chat at the same time. I was going to treat it like a task in itself, like washing up, like I'm here smoking. Smoking is what I'm doing right now. It didn't take me very long at all to realise that I didn't like it. And I was one of those people that have been like, I don't want to give up smoking because I don't like it. Once I actually really started focusing on that cigarette, I realised it was pretty mank actually. So yeah, it tasted horrible. It felt horrible. And when I started to focus on it, I realised that actually I was feeling quite nauseous each time I smoked as well. And I hate that feeling so much. And I hadn't really put the two together. I had realised that I was often feeling quite sick, but I hadn't in any way attributed that to smoking, even though cigarettes are full of billion poisons or something. Not an actual billion, I doubt an actual billion. I'm being hyperbole. But yeah, they're full of loads of chemicals, including nicotine, which does make you queasy, and cyanide, and all this other crap. No wonder I was feeling sick. I don't really know why I didn't notice that that was the problem. Within 3 or 4 cigarettes, I was feeling like I really don't want to be smoking anymore. But I carried on anyway. Carried on until the day before Stoptober started. Stoptober is a thing, I think it's only in the UK, but it might be in the US as well, where groups of people who smoke get together to try and quit together and support each other throughout that. I think the NHS run it, I'm not sure. I piggybacked off that energy, basically. I joined in with that. I didn't think that that would make much of a difference to me when I started, because I'm not really a groups person. I'm not really a big joiner. A little bit shy, and I thought, oh, how is chatting to a load of strangers going to help me with this? And I was on Facebook at the time. I'm not anymore, but I joined a Facebook group called Stoptober, and there were loads and loads of people who were all going through exactly the same thing as me. They were all using different methods to quit, but we're all doing it together. We were all in the same boat, and it was actually really, really helpful to have a space where you could go in and say, I'm struggling today, and have other people say, oh, I was struggling yesterday, but I'm feeling much better today. If you can just push through today, you're going to feel better tomorrow. And so that was useful. It's not for everyone, but it can help. So if you have friends that will quit with you, or you can join a group like that. Stoptober is in October, I think. But you can also always join in with the New Year energy as well. If this has come to you too late for that, that's fine. You know, use whatever you need to do to give you that supported feeling. I wasn't actually in that group for very long. I stayed in it for that month, but after that I left the group because they were always talking about smoking, and I was kind of over it by then. Like, I had a little wobble 3 months after I quit where I was like, oh, I could do with a cigarette. But then I thought about it and thought, actually, I don't want a cigarette. What I want to do is return to comforting patterns that make me feel safe, and that's a harmful one. And it's really important that we can recognise when the patterns that comfort us also harm us. It's not just about addiction, it's about everything. Yeah, recognising that was a big part of my general growth. Okay, so I've been chatting for ages and ages and ages, and I haven't even moved around in my house, so you're probably really, really bored of sitting here just listening to me chat on. And so I'm going to quickly say about the cessation aids that I used to help me quit smoking, because I did use nicotine replacement therapy, but I had used patches in the past, found they give me a really itchy rash. I had used those lozenges that you let dissolve in your mouth. Oh, they're vile, aren't they? They taste like wet cardboard, and then they leave this white stuff around your mouth, and it's no, that was nasty. Oh, even the thought of that is making me gross out. I had tried the little Nicorette inhaler things. I didn't find them particularly good. You know, the ones that look like the Vicks vapor things that you stick up your nose, except these supposed to suck it in your mouth. It looks kind of like a tampon. Really weird. Didn't like that either. But what actually did help me, I used vaping to help me quit smoking incrementally, because it was just much easier for me than going cold turkey. I recognised that my addiction was in 2 parts, okay? I was physically into the chemicals that the cigarettes were giving me, and whenever I quit I would cry a lot because, you know, like I said before, it's a natural antidepressant and stuff. But the other side of it was the habit thing, you know, like it's habit to light up as soon as you wake up. It's habit to light up as soon as the phone rings. It is habit to say, I'm going to wash up, clean the counters down, and then I'll have a cigarette, and then I'll do the ironing, and then I'll have a cigarette, and it's like a little reward for you. It's like a routine thing. There's certain cigarettes that you have every day regardless of need, yeah? And so I needed to tackle those two things separately. Doing them together was just far too big for me. And that's why quitting cold turkey hadn't really worked for me before. Well, that and that I wasn't ready for it, like I said before. And so I got myself one of those big vapes. You know, the ones that do the massive clouds and make you look like a right knob? Yeah, I got one of them. But what I did was make my own vape juice for it. There was an app that I found online. It was called Vapor Calc, but I'm sure there are others which helped me work out the exact measurements that I needed. I bought pharmaceutical grade nicotine online, and I used little 1 ml syringes to measure it out. And I found a recipe that I liked. I did not use tobacco flavoured vape juices whatsoever because I wanted to get away from that taste straight away. My husband, on the other hand, he did use nicotine flavoured juices, and he still vapes regularly every day now on quite a high nicotine strength. I don't really vape anymore. I do very, very occasionally. When I do, it's less than 1 milligram of nicotine in my vape, and so I'm not really having any nicotine at all anymore. But obviously I didn't start off that way. So at first I had a mid to high strength nicotine in one of these vapes that's like a box with a chimney and all the big, big clouds, because I wanted to get that real back of the throat feeling. And I started off like that, and I just used it as I would have a cigarette. So I went outside to smoke still, to vape, sorry, still. I still vape first thing in the morning when I was on the phone, when I was having my coffee, as a little reward for things. I treated it exactly like smoking. And then a few weeks after that, I started cutting the nicotine down, but only by 1 microgram at a time. So I didn't notice the difference. For ages, I didn't notice the difference. And then when I got to 0.5 mil of nicotine overall, I did sort of start to feel a bit sometimes. But by then, the idea of smoking a cigarette had already started to feel quite alien to me, actually. Because with the vape things, they're different to the Nicorette inhalers because you're not holding it like this. You're holding it like this. So it feels different. You're already changing a little bit of that habit. I'd also changed the taste. Instead of tasting tobacco flavours, I was tasting apple Jolly Rancher flavour or a tropical flavour instead. Before I started cutting down the nicotine, I'd already got used to not having that tobacco-y taste. Eventually, I got down to 0 nicotine. And that is when I then started to break habits instead. So I still continued to vape even on 0 nicotine, which is not something that I would recommend somebody does, by the way. Obviously, nothing is good to go in your lungs apart from air. And so putting anything into your lungs that isn't air is not good for them. But it's a hell of a lot better for you than smoking a cigarette is. And so I was okay with it. And so I vaped without nicotine then for a few months probably. And gradually I would cut out 1 vape a day. So I started off by saying, instead of vaping the second I open my eyes in the morning, I will wait for half an hour. Okay, just half an hour. If you already don't smoke in that first half hour when you wake up, just see if you can push your first one back by half an hour. And then I can't remember what the next one I gave up was. It might have been my on the phone ones. I stopped vaping when I was on the phone. And then about 6 months after that, I realised that I hadn't vaped for a few days. And then I had a moment of panic, like, where is my vape? Oh my God, I'm going to end up starting smoking again. Panic stations, panic stations. But it was fine. I found my vape again. I had a vape again. I didn't feel guilty about it because I hadn't gone back to smoking. And it was too much for me. The clouds were too big for me. It was making me choke. And so a few months later, I actually got a little one for those times when everything has just all gone wrong. This one, I got one of these little ones. Other little ones do exist, but again, it's not something that you would hold like a cigarette. You would have to hold it like this, and so it feels different anyway. And that does go some way to helping you break those habits. And still now, I will hold this while I'm talking, but not actually vape. I've got some juice in there. I think it has got a tiny little bit of nicotine in it. I had a little slip back before. But you know what? Whenever you're giving up a substance, you're going to have some relapses. If you can relapse to something that is not your original addiction, you're going to find it a lot easier. Okay, so this video has gone on for far, far too long, and you're probably very, very bored of just listening to me talk. So, quick recap. What did I do to quit smoking? First, I started getting into my mindset. I started researching the tobacco industry and realising just how corrupt and disgusting it really is, and realised that I didn't want to be dependent on those people for my survival. I read Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking and internalised some of the messages from that. Even though they weren't all very, very helpful to me, they didn't all resonate with me straight away, they did sort of start helping me to change where my head was at about smoking. Next thing, when you smoke, you're only smoking. It is a job in itself. You need to focus completely on what it feels like, what it tastes like, and what it feels like in your body, whether or not you actually like it. Because when you realise that you don't actually like it, it's going to be a lot easier for you to stop. And then I used a nicotine replacement therapy that worked for me, that I had control over, and that I could gradually reduce my nicotine before I had to change those habits. Last thing was tackling those habits. That was the more difficult thing, but we get there in the end, because once you've weaned yourself off of the nicotine dependence, you will feel like you can do anything. And so giving up a little bad habit, it's not going to hurt you after you've managed to quit your nicotine addiction. And the last thing, which I haven't actually mentioned once in this video, but you may have seen me do that when I was talking about quitting before, is realising that when you stop smoking, you're not quitting anything. You are gaining stuff, right? It is not quitting to stop doing something that hurts you, okay? You wouldn't hold a burning coal and then when you finally put it down go, oh, I've quit that now. Of course you wouldn't, right? What you're doing is making a choice. You're making a choice about what it is that you want. You're making a choice to put yourself first. And you're making a choice to be conscious about your actions instead of letting your actions just get on with stuff while you bob along in the current behind them, helpless to where they might take you. You might not give up the very first time you try. You might not give up the very second time you try. But if you don't want to smoke anymore, you don't have to. You will get there. It will get better. And if you're trying to quit smoking and you're struggling and you haven't got a group that you can chat to, drop me a comment or something. I'll message you. We can get through the difficult days together. It'll all be fine, okay? Because if you can just hang on for 5 minutes through that crazy bit, and it'll go away. Remember guys, I am not a doctor, I am not a medical professional of any kind, and everything that I've said to you in this video is not intended to be taken as medical advice. That said, if anything that I did say helps you in any way, please let me know, because I will be so, so proud of you. Join me on Monday for my next video about how I manifested my magical life and finally got happy.